Hello, everyone. I'm Tanya Rivero, joining you from my home studio. Thank you for being with us. The mayor of Minneapolis spoke today about, quote, righting the wrong of George Floyd's death after a night of protests in his city in response to the black man's death during an incident with white police officers. The mayor reached out for help from the National Guard when those protests turned violent last night. Multiple fires were set, windows smashed, and stores looted. At least 5 businesses were destroyed, including a Target. One fire was so large it could be seen across the city. Protesters and police clashed late into the night. Officers used tear gas and rubber bullets to try and break up the crowds. In the midst of all this, one man was shot and killed. Today, body cam video of Floyd's arrest was released. CBS News Chief Justice and Homeland Security correspondent Jeff Pegues is in Minneapolis with more.
Fires continued to burn as the sun came up in Minneapolis. Black smoke rose from the destruction. Civil rights activists say the unrest is years of pent-up frustration with city leaders and police.
They have not moved quickly enough to root out the systemic racism within the department.
It was the second night of violence sparked by Monday's death of George Floyd, who could be seen on video with a police officer's knee on his neck, even after he said he couldn't breathe. Most protesters were peaceful, but some clashed with police. Looters broke into nearby businesses, smashing windows and taking whatever they wanted. Look behind me, you can still see the smoke billowing into the air on the other side of this building. We saw firefighters arrive, but even overnight, they were hanging back. As some of these structures were set on fire, the firefighters didn't move in quickly because you didn't want to introduce firefighters into this situation with the rioters. In a new report, the fire department says paramedics in the ambulance checked Floyd's pulse several times, finding none. He was later pronounced dead at the hospital.
Let me be clear. The arresting officer killed someone.
Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey is calling for the arresting officer, Derek Chauvin, to face criminal charges.
He'd be alive today if he were white.
But are you saying that the officer, Chauvin, is racist?
The facts that I've seen, which are minimal, certainly lead me down the path that race was involved.
The mayor is also urging calm and asking for the public's help in keeping the peace.
And Jeff Pegues joins me now from Minneapolis. Hi, Jeff. The body cam video from one of the officers was released this morning. What do we know about it, and how is it going to play a role in the investigation?
Well, it's a big part of the investigation, Tanya. We've seen several pieces of video, some cell phone video, some security camera video from the area come out. Now, this body camera video is obviously something that the officers were wearing at the time of the incident. And so what investigators might be able to hear is the audio. You know, what was being said at the time. Was Floyd resisting? Is that why police took some of the actions that they took? Obviously not the actions that Officer Chauvin took, who had his knee pressed against Floyd's neck. And so this body cam video will be important as far as the overall investigation and enlightening prosecutors as to the mindset of the officers at the time. But Tanya, I want to focus on what's happening here behind me. I've never seen anything like this. I've covered a lot of these stories. But what you see here behind me are people in broad daylight looting. In this Target store, you have people climbing through this window over here, coming out with all sorts of merchandise. And, you know, it's not just people who live in this neighborhood. We're seeing cars pull up, cars with trailers pull up, and loading up and then taking off. I stopped one woman who was coming from that store with her 2 kids, and they were carrying dog food. I said, you know that's looting. And she said, well, what's that? And I said, well, that's stealing. And she said, oh, and just kind of kept on going. Her kids put the dog food in the back of the car and they took off. And so this is an unusual scene here, and it comes on the heels of what happened overnight. Let me point over here, because you see the smoldering remains of what was low-income housing that was being built in this neighborhood, but it has been destroyed as well. That will obviously set construction back. And then this building next door, it was torched too. So there is still a lot at the scene, and what we don't see at this point are police. And there's a reason why. They don't want any more confrontations, and so they're on the perimeter of all this, clearly monitoring the situation to make sure that things don't spark up again. But you don't see any police on the scene here. Over there, you have firefighters. They're working to keep the flames down, to make sure that this doesn't spread. But it is still very much, Tanya, a combustible situation here at the scene.
Jeff, what an extraordinary scene. Thank you so much for telling us about what's going on there in Minneapolis. Thanks so much for that report.